Welcome to WhiskyCast, cast strength conversation featuring news and interviews from the world of whiskey. I'm Mark Gillespie. This is episode number 910 for December 6th, 2021. Coming up in a few minutes.
I could have stayed with Beams and Tony and had an amazing life kind of at Laphroaig and at Distillery. Time to test yourself, John, and push a wee bit further. So that's kind of where it ended up for me, Mark.
After 27 years at Laphroaig and 16 as the distillery's manager, John Campbell is embarking on a new challenge. He is signed on as the production director and master blender at Scotland's Lochlea Distillery. In his first interview since announcing his new job, he'll join me later on WhiskyCast In-Depth. We'll also have the What I'm Tasting This Week department, your voice, behind the label, December's Whiskey Club of the Month, and...
What I fear, Mark, is that somebody who doesn't take the time to dig a little deeper and realize that, why we're doing this might think that we're trying to cut corners.
The news is next on this week's WhiskyCast.
What do Japan and Scotland have in common? You guessed it, whiskey. That's why Dewar's brought these two cultures together in our newest cask series innovation, introducing Dewar's 8-year Japanese Smooth. We took the Dewar's you know and love and finished it in rare Mizunara oak casks for a complex and balanced Scotch whiskey like no other.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
So, in Spain, they call Redbreast Petit Roco. It's me, but a touch more exotic. Kind of like a Redbreast PX edition. Finished in Pedro Jimenez casks, adding a velvety and decadent dimension. I won't lie. A climate like this makes me wish I was a migratory bird.
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast. Redbreast. Pass it on.
Let's start with the news, and we're welcoming a new sponsor for the news segments here on WhiskyCast each week. Thanks to the Delmore and White & Mackay for coming on board as a WhiskyCast sponsor. Scotch Whisky Distillers raised a lot of money for charity Friday with a whiskey auction hosted by Sotheby's at Edinburgh's Barnbougle Castle for the Distillers charity. That's the charitable arm of the Worshipful Company of Distillers. The Distillers' one-of-one auction raised more than £2.5 million, with 42 unique lots donated by the distilleries, including a 4-bottle set of Glenfiddich single malts from 1955, 1957, 1958, and 1959 that went for just over £1 million. Johnny Fowle of Sotheby's says the final results turned out to be more than 2.5 times what he and his colleagues had predicted before the auction.
I think one of the most interesting things about the sale was that we do have a culture for, Macallan and Dalmore and Bowmore as well to sort of dominate the headlines with high prices. And Bowmore obviously performed extremely well. But I think what was really encouraging was to see every distillery who cooperated and collaborated and donated to this sale. Everything did well. I mean, just everything did well. It was just great, which I think is just the biggest boon for the industry. And I think everyone's, just Scotch whisky as a whole benefited from Friday.
Of course, the industry is not the only one who will benefit. The Distillers charity will be spreading the proceeds among 4 charities through its Youth Action Fund to help disadvantaged young people in Scotland. There are also plans in the works for another one-of-one auction in 2023. The European Union's tariff on bourbons and other American whiskeys officially expires at the end of this month, and American whiskey makers are hoping to win back some of the market share that they've lost over the last 3.5 years. When the end of the tariff was announced at the end of October, Distilled Spirits Council CEO Chris Swanger told us at the time that they were waiting on final federal approval for export promotion funding for 2022. That approval is now in. Discus will receive more than $1.1 million from the Agriculture Department's Market Access Program. That's nearly double the 2021 funding. It goes to help fund promotions in key export markets aimed at boosting sales of American whiskeys and other spirits. Meanwhile, we have heard about pandemic-related supply chain issues affecting all kinds of businesses, especially in the middle of this holiday shopping season. Here's yet another example of how whiskey makers are being affected. Last week, Wyoming Whiskey celebrated the 9th anniversary of the release of its very first bottle of bourbon by announcing a temporary switch in bottles from the custom design that it's used for those first 9 years. Those custom bottles are made in Mexico, but Wyoming Whiskey co-founder David DeFazio told me the glass factory there does not have the capacity to make new bottles for them right now.
They face the same issues that we all have. And, when you have to shut a plant down for weeks at a time or even months in some instances, that's a lot of glass that's not being made. And then you have to deal with the, ongoing issue of employees getting sick or not being able to show up because family's sick or, who knows what's going on in Mexico City, that is causing the folks not be able to work at any given time. But yeah, we're on the list, but I'm not exactly sure where we are on the list.
So your solution right now is to use, for lack of a better term, generic bottles, right?
Yeah, we're using a stock bottle that is roughly similar to the one that we've been using since the inception 9 years ago. Today is our 9th anniversary of the release of our very first batch of Wyoming whiskey, and we've been using that same bottle ever since, and we've come to love it. And I think our fans and consumers have become very accustomed to it. And we put a lot into that. When you're making whiskey, you got a lot of time to design a bottle and a label. And, what I fear, Mark, is that somebody who doesn't take the time to dig a little deeper and realize that, why we're doing this might think that we're trying to cut corners. And we're not. Trust me, we want our bottle to be in production and in our inventory and being used, but we just can't get it right now. And so, and actually the stock bottle that we're buying is more expensive. So it's not like we're saving any money. We're not trying to cut a corner. We are just reacting to a difficult situation in the best way we know how.
Wyoming Whiskey has ties with Edrington, and DeFazio notes that his colleagues in Scotland and throughout the industry are also having similar issues. The problem could get even worse. Remember when the pandemic shut down many businesses last year? One of those so-called non-essential industries was the logging industry, and we are now starting to see the impacts of that shutdown, since logs to be used for making whiskey barrels are generally air-dried for at least 18 months before they can be used. David DeFazio says he's been warned that supplies of new barrels will be tight in the coming months.
You've got loggers, which, if you think about it, this thing started a year and a half, close to 2 years ago now, and so it's starting to hit. So maybe they're a little short on wood. You've got drivers who are hauling the logs. We know that there's been a trucker shortage. You got coopers who have been sick. There was probably shutdowns at their plants and facilities. So that's probably had an effect and probably still affecting them. And then you've got truckers, that have to deliver the barrels. So there's a lot of labor in that chain that could cause disruption. And I would suspect that that's the issue.
Wyoming Whiskey sources its barrels from independent stave companies' cooperages in Missouri and Kentucky. CEO Brad Boswell told me via text message today that while his company is in relatively good shape on log and stave inventories, the overall market for barrels is tightening, and there are shortages elsewhere in the industry. Over the last several years, Pernod Ricard's Irish Distillers unit has been investing in major upgrades at Midleton Distillery, but those changes have largely been behind the scenes and not seen by visitors to what has been known until now as the Jameson experience at Old Midleton Distillery. That is changing as we speak, since work crews have arrived on site to start a €13 million project to renovate the entire tourism aspect of the Old Midleton Distillery. Serious construction will begin after the holidays, when work will get underway on a temporary visitors center in one of the old distillery's warehouses, since the project will involve working on buildings that date back nearly 200 years. Simon Fay of Irish Distillers told me the goal is to create a world-class experience for visitors similar to the Jameson Distillery Bow Street in Dublin, but with a wider perspective.
We want to try and find a balance in Midleton for the other brands within the portfolio. So it's not going to be dominated by Jameson. Obviously, clearly Jameson has a strong position within the overall Irish category, but we want to ensure that the other brands, the likes of Redbreast, Midleton, Spot Range, Method Madness, Powers, and the Pogue Castle now, that they all have their own space, fair share, and that we can bring the rest of the whiskies of Irish distillers to life in Midleton. So the Midleton consumer proposition or experience is going to be very different to the Bow Street one, but the core fundamentals of, we want to explain to you the process. Okay, we'll do that. We want to kind of do a tasting with you across the full portfolio. We will do that. So there are similar kind of, structural elements that will remain the same.
The first phase of the project is expected to take 12 to 18 months, with a goal of completing the entire renovation in time for Midleton Distillery's 200th anniversary in 2025. Meanwhile, another Irish distillery's expansion plans are on hold until at least next spring. The Irish Examiner reports critics have appealed Dingle Distillery's €7 million expansion project to Ireland's National Planning Board. Kerry County Council approved the plans several weeks ago. The project would include expanded production space and a new visitors center to replace the current shack out front that welcomes guests and a closet-sized gift shop. One of the critics lives next door to the distillery and says the smell and noise of the existing distillery already affect her, while another critic is upset over plans for a 3-story circular tower as part of the project. He said in his complaint that, quote, "It's a distillery, not Rapunzel's castle." And finally, we reported several months ago on the legal battle in Germany over the name of Outlander star Sam Heughan's Scotch whisky, the Sassenach. The Sasse distillery in Schopingen, Germany, fought against a European-wide trademark for the Sassenach on the grounds that the name of Heughan's whisky is too similar to its name. Now, the European Union's Intellectual Property Office has rejected Heughan's appeal and says the Sassenach cannot be used as a trademark for whiskies. According to the Drinks Business, Heughan can still sell his whiskey in Germany as long as he changes its name. You can keep up with the latest whiskey news all week long at WhiskyCast.com. The news is brought to you by the Dalmore.
Hello, Richard Patterson here, Master Distiller, Master Blender for the Dalmore. Whenever the team and I are in the world sharing our exceptional single malt, we like to keep in touch with Mark Gillespie and the latest news from WhiskyCast.
Just a quick reminder, our Friday night happy hour live webcasts are taking a brief hiatus and will return in early January. On-demand replays of our past webcasts are available right now at the WhiskyCast YouTube channel. Time now for the WhiskyCast calendar of events, brought to you by Catoctin Creek Distilling. We're at that time of the year when whiskey shops are holding all kinds of tasting events, and while we do not have a complete list, it is worth noting that Westport Whiskey and Wine in Louisville, Kentucky, has a Peerless Distillery tasting this Thursday night with Master Distiller Caleb Kilburn, and a Bardstown Bourbon Company tasting with Bourbon Hall of Fame Master Distiller Steve Nally on the 16th. While Julio's Liquors in Westboro, Massachusetts, has a Whiskey Wednesday event with Nico Whiskey this week and the Macallan next week. After the holidays, the scaled-down Victoria Whiskey Festival will be in Victoria, British Columbia, January 13th through the 16th. The Bergen Whiskey and Beer Festival is January 21st and 22nd in Bergen, Norway. The National Whisky Festival takes place in Glasgow, Scotland, January 22nd, and the Whisky Global is in Vancouver, British Columbia on January 28th and 29th. Remember, all in-person events are still subject to change on short notice, and you may have to show proof of vaccination or a recent negative COVID test in order to attend. The calendar of events is brought to you by Catoctin Creek Distilling, makers of the Virginia Rye Whiskey. You'll find their Roundstone Rye at fine whiskey shops in 26 U.S. states, 3 continents, and online. Visit the new buyvirginiarye.com site for more details. And please drink responsibly.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
Happy holidays! On behalf of Redbreast, here's to you and yours. Eating well, enjoying a redbreast or two, and getting all snug and cosy on the couch. Reminds me of my own nest. Sure, there's no cushions or blankets, but I do have some very fancy decorative twigs, let me tell you.
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast. Redbreast. Pass it on.
WhiskyCast In-Depth is brought to you by Oban and the Classic Malts lineup. John Campbell stunned Laphroaig fans a few weeks ago when he announced that he would be leaving the Islay Distillery after 27 years, with the last 16 as Laphroaig's manager. At the time, he did not say where he was heading, only that he wanted to rejoin his family on the Scottish mainland. Now we know. It was announced the other day that he has joined Lochlea Distillery as its production director and master blender. John joined me on a Zoom call for his first interview since taking the job. Let's start off with the obvious question. Why, after so many years at Laphroaig, why move to Lochlea?
Good question, and it's for a multitude of reasons, I guess, and all kind of fitting, I guess, the puzzle at once. So you kind of know my family situation. I have 4 sons, all at different ages in their life, and the youngest is just about to start school. So a decision had to be made in schooling. The oldest ones, I guess, they are on the main island, and I was on Islay. And so during COVID, you weren't allowed to travel unless it was basically a medical emergency. So that was tough. You just couldn't get a ferry, you couldn't get a plane unless it was a medical emergency. So you were literally on the rock. Yeah, so that was tough as well. So didn't kind of want that. And I guess then just this is other personal reflections on COVID, career-wise. If you're going to move, it's going to be now or it's going to be never at all. So these things kind of happened. Had a flat in Glasgow, so had a base on the mainland, and Lochlea is 30 minutes drive in the morning from my house in the west end of Glasgow. So it seemed easy after that, and it just we've got a base now in Glasgow where the youngster can get schooling. I can go and see the other guys really easy as well as they kind of develop their lives. So, and I guess personal point of view now, career point of view, you get to be in at the start making something. So that it definitely has an advantage to be able to shape a whiskey and to shape a brand is you don't get that opportunity very often, so taking it.
There is something to be said for reinventing yourself once in a while, right?
Yeah, so going from peated to unpeated. So and I think it'll there is nothing wrong with Laphroaig, and I will always love Laphroaig, and I'll be forever thankful to Laphroaig for the platform it's given me in my life. So it's nothing to do with things like that. It's more just me being challenged, I guess, because Laphroaig has 200 years of heritage, nobody mucks that about. So this, again, just to be in at the beginning, to be able to shape and to be able to kind of set a path for Lochlea is just, it's just different, and it's a kind of once in a lifetime opportunity, I think.
Besides the proximity of Lochlea to Glasgow, what else attracted you to these guys? We had them on the show earlier this year, and it's an interesting project and a great startup. But what else about it was really attractive?
Just the values of the brand certainly match mine. It wants to kind of, I guess, be sustainable, that magic word, but just like to be like minimize the impact on the environment. It can be all on the one side. So I think that's something I can bring to Lochlea. The barley is grown like in the fields next to the distillery. The bit they're missing to floor malted. So I can help with that at some point in the future, so that it could all be done on the one farm, basically. And no distillery in Scotland does that right now, from farm to casks out. So that would be something that would make Lochlea unique within the whole of the Scotch whisky industry.
I remember when we did our first interview many years ago, right after you had been named manager at Laphroaig, and there was this big deal about you being the first Iliac to run Laphroaig in close to 200 years.
Yep.
And we had that discussion, and we've met and run into each other many times since then. What memories do you take from Laphroaig with you?
Oh, wow. So many. Like, so many, 27 years worth. That's a lot. It's kind of, it's things like, up until 10 days ago, my kids only knew me as working at Laphroaig. They never knew any other life for me. So, like, things like that is, like, that's amazing. One of my, well, 2 out of the 4 boys only knew me as staying in the Laphroaig Distillery manager's house. So, like, I've been the manager there for just about 16 years. So it's a long time, and it's amazing. It's given me access to so many amazing events, amazing people, just like whiskey drinkers, community. The whole whiskey community is amazing. It really is. And that's something Laphroaig is a huge brand. It's the biggest peated single malt on the planet. And so it gave access to a lot of things, and I guess from a professional point of view. And just, yeah, it's quirky, it's cool, it's comfy in its shoes, it knows who it is, and it's just a great brand. It's an amazing brand. So, yeah, it's just given me so many things, both personally and professionally over the years. Yeah.
You going to miss it, seeing the sunrise over Islay in the morning in the fog around the distillery?
I'm sure I will, but I'll just have a wee drink of Laphroaig, and then I'll be fine. I'll be back home before you know it. So, yep. And I've got a house on the island, so I'll be able to go back and check in with the folks, see how everyone's doing, because the relationships at Laphroaig are almost as important, or the relationships I've built with the folks at Laphroaig are really important as well, and within the Laphroaig, the team that supports Laphroaig as well. So, yeah, that's lifetime relationships there, so that's important too. They're still nourished, and that I still manage to get my allowance at Laphroaig to keep me topped up if I do feel homesick.
When football coaches change jobs, they often wind up having a whole bunch of branded gear from their old team that they have to get rid of. What's it like for you now after 27 years at Laphroaig with all the Laphroaig gear you've accumulated over the years? You taking that with you to Glasgow? Are you going to leave it on the island, or are you going to have a tag sale?
It's a really good question, and I don't know. I don't know what to do with it. Maybe, I'm not sure anybody would want my clothes anyway. But like, it might be something to do. It might be maybe raise some money for a charity on the island. So maybe we could do stuff like that. Because, yeah, some of it's still good.
I think this is the first time I've seen you when you aren't wearing something dark green. Have you had learned how to change a whole new color palette yet?
No branding on me today, but I'm sure that'll come. So,
how much influence are you going to be able to have over the new Lochlea malts, knowing that they've started releasing, their first whiskey is out, and they started before you joined? Will you change what they'd been doing? Are you going to figure out what they were doing and do more of the same? How do you adjust going into a new place and putting your stamp on it?
I guess the first thing is, like, to me, it's not about me. I'm kind of basically interviewing everyone to understand what Lochlea is and to try and make a whiskey that matches that character. So I guess the thing I'm really trying to do is understand the personality of the site, the people of the site, the brand, and trying to get a whiskey to match that. Within the Lowlands region, it's unpeated malt, so all of these things will contribute to the shape that I'll be responsible for. But I think that the team will help as well. Quite a lot of the team here have good noses, and so I'll be using that. But you're right, there is just over 3 years worth of production down the pipe. That's probably my biggest job right now, is to understand the stock, what we're dealing with, and what the options are, and I guess what the end goal is, and the steps we need to take to get there. So big strategic job on just now to get all that in place so that we can hit the ground running next year with the steps hopefully in place to get to that place.
It sounds like you're really looking forward to this. Really a big change of pace for you.
Yeah, no, it's a different job completely. Quite a lot of the Laphroaig job was front of house and kind of legal. So that was the two main focuses. This one is going to be like putting the structures in place behind the scenes so that the efficiency is correct, the spirit quality is correct, that we've got the lay down plan that suits the kind of long term. Like, again, after I'm gone, it'll still be there. So that's the bit that's exciting, I guess. Then the bit of, I guess that's the biggest thing for me, then just to why I'm here, is to try and set up the spirit requirements for the future and set up the spirit quality for the brand in 10, 15 years' time.
I have to ask, and you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but how did this come about? Did they reach out to you? Did you reach out to them? How did it all work out?
Just a chance conversation. I'd had, I guess, feelings of, well, as I said earlier, due to COVID, and just like, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? And it was just an in-house discussion. Somebody asked me a question that led to, oh, okay. And then that led to an interview. It led to me coming down here with Sarah and Oren, and we it just connected. There was just a connection with the owners, with Neil and Jen and their kids, and it stayed for lunch, just about stayed for dinner. It was easy. And then so at that point, now you have to make a big decision, because you don't leave Laphroaig lightly. And so lots of conversations with family, first and foremost, understanding, and all of the boys were excited that was going to be closer. So that was good. Good in lots of ways, I guess. That was important. That was a big tick in the box. The project looked different. I was going to have a different responsibility, more responsibility, kind of on the board here as well. So it's a completely different responsibility. So that would stretch me, getting the spirit being known for a non-peated spirit would stretch me. And so all of these things, I guess. And when I spoke to Beam Suntory and the management team, they got it. They absolutely got it. And they kind of understood, because internally we had been having conversations along these lines about what was next kind of for me. So it just seemed like, okay, yeah, everyone got it. It seemed easy. So, yeah, as I said, there's no kind of hard feelings on any side. All good.
Were there opportunities within Beam Suntory for you to move back to the Scottish mainland to work out of Glasgow somewhere if you'd wanted to?
I guess there could have been. Yep, there could have been, but like it just wasn't the same as this project. So it was. As I said earlier, it's either I could have stayed with Beam Suntory and had an amazing life, kind of at Laphroaig and that, but I just thought, right, time to test yourself, John, and push a wee bit further. So that's kind of where it ended up for me, Mark.
By the way, you can find out more about Lochlea Distillery in our archives. I talked with Malcolm Rennie and David Ferguson of Lochlea in July during episode 878 of WhiskyCast. That's WhiskyCast In-Depth, brought to you by Oban. Every sip of Oban is like a postcard from Scotland. Whether it's the classic Oban 14-year-old, the 18-year-old, Oban Little Bay, or the Distillers edition, every drop comes from the coastal town of Oban and a distillery just 206 steps away from the sea. It's one of Scotland's smallest distilleries, with just 7 people who make whiskey the same way their predecessors have since 1794. Find out more at obanwhiskey.com. The What I'm Tasting This Week department is brought to you by Sagamore Spirit. I'm slowly working my way now through the backlog of samples on my tasting table that have gathered during my recovery from the #concussion from hell. Let's start with the Arran Barrel Reserve. It's a no-age statement single malt Scotch matured in American oak casks and bottled at 43% ABV. The nose is fruity and sweet with hints of pineapple, mango, and orange oil, along with vanilla, honeycomb, and a soft oakiness. The taste is tart and fruity with gentle spices, vanilla, honeycomb, and a touch of oak. The finish, long, well-balanced, and complex. I'm scoring the Arran Barrel Reserve a 92. The latest release in Johnny Walker Blue Label's Ghost and Rare series of limited edition whiskeys focuses on the long-closed Pittyvake distillery, with a healthy percentage of the remaining stocks from that distillery. It's bottled at 43.8% ABV. The nose has notes of dried fruits, red apples, raspberry jam, and honey. The taste is fruity with a touch of spices, led by fresh berries, plums, raisins, honey, and butterscotch notes. The finish is long and fruity, with touches of spice and oak that add a nice complexity. I'm scoring the Johnny Walker Blue Label Ghost and Rare Pittyvake edition a 93. I'll have more tasting notes in just a minute, but first, this week's tasting notes are brought to you by Sagamore Spirit Rye Whiskey. They're reviving the tradition of Maryland-style rye at their Baltimore farm and waterfront distillery. In-person tastings are available once again at the distillery in Baltimore, but you'll also find a variety of virtual tours, tastings, and other experiences at the Sagamore Spirit website. They're offering WhiskyCast listeners a free virtual guided tasting. When you buy a bottle at your local retailer, a Sagamore Spirit teammate will guide you through it. Visit SagamoreSpirit.com and use the code word WhiskyCast, all one word, to access. Please drink responsibly. I received a sample recently of the Benromic 21-year-old from Gordon and MacPhail. It's bottled at 43% ABV, and the nose has a nice sherry influence with notes of orange marmalade, figs, dates, a hint of raspberry jam, and subtle spices. The taste is anything but subtle, though. It's full of spicy character with cinnamon, clove, and cardamom, balanced by baked oranges, berry cobbler, and a hint of wood smoke. The finish is long with dark fruits, lingering spices, and just a hint of smoke. I'm scoring the Ben Romick 21-year-old a 93. And last but not least, I was finally able to open the sample of Bruichladdich Octomore 12.1 Islay single malt. As usual, this year's Octomore 0.1 release is 5 years old and matured in first fill ex-bourbon. The Scottish barley was peated at 130.8 parts per million of phenols, and it's bottled at 59.9% ABV. The nose has touches of grilled fruits, dry leaves, toasted coconut, and hints of honey and vanilla. The taste starts off with a balance between sweet and savory notes, followed by a burst of chili powder, peat smoke, and tangy barbecue sauce. Touches of grilled fruits, brown sugar, and honey add complexity and balance. The finish is long and smoky with a lingering pepperiness, and I'm scoring Bruichladdich Octomore 12.1 a 93. The What I'm Tasting This Week department is brought to you by Sagamore Spirit. I'll be adding these tasting notes to our searchable list of more than 3,200 whiskeys from all over the world. Check it out this week at WhiskyCast.com.
It's been 175 years and Dewar's continues to stay curious. We're proud to announce the newest addition to the innovative Dewar's 8-year cask-finish series of Scotch whiskey, Dewar's Japanese Smooth. Brought to life by our award-winning master blender, Stephanie McLeod, Japanese Smooth is a perfectly balanced 8-year-old Scotch whiskey that puts a pioneering and innovative focus on our aging process. After 8 years in Scotland, we blend, age again, then finish this whiskey in casks made from 200-year-old Mizunara oak trees. Rare, sure, but worth it. The Mizunara oak perfectly complements the tasty notes with Dewar's Scotch whiskey. Japanese Smooth is loaded with Dewar's signature honey and floral notes, with the Japanese Mizunara oak adding exotic sweet and spicy flavors. Curious? Try this one in a perfect Japanese highball or on the rocks.
Each month we honor a whiskey club somewhere in the world, and it's time to announce December's Whiskey Club of the Month. Thanks to Jose Cuenca for sending us this email to nominate his club. I would like to nominate my whiskey club, the Four Babosos. We are a relatively new whiskey club and are not afraid to admit that we are novices, but eager to learn about whiskey. Our club is less than a year old, but we have known each other for at least 15 years and up to 35-plus years, and enjoy each other's company, and decided to learn more about and enjoy different whiskeys. It's a great way to get together more often and discuss our thoughts on different whiskey bottles. Thank you very much for your consideration. Well, gang, this is what whiskey clubs are all about. Congratulations, Jose. We'll be sending you 24 WhiskyCast Glencairn glasses to use at your tastings. Now, if you'd like to nominate your whiskey club for our Club of the Month honors, it's easy. Just do like Jose did and use the contact form at whiskycast.com to get in touch with us. Tell us a bit about your club, and if you're active on social media or have a website, we'll be glad to add a link on the Whiskey Club's page at whiskycast.com so other whiskey lovers can find you. We pick a new winner on the first episode each month, and we do carry over nominations from month to month. So if you have nominated your club before, there is no need to do it again. Once again, congratulations to the Four Babosos, December's Whiskey Club of the Month. And thanks to Glencairn Crystal for helping us honor whiskey clubs all over the world. Now, let's open up the inbox for your voice, presented by Scarabus, Islay Single Malt Scotch Whisky. Back to our story in the news about Dingle Distillery's expansion plans being put on hold, and that comment from one of the critics about it being, quote, a distillery, not Rapunzel's castle. Well, our friend Irish journalist Bill Linnane tweeted this. Idea. Rebrand as Disney Distillery and go full castle. Get Graham on a wire dressed as Tinkerbell. The tourists will lap it up. Graham, of course, is distillery manager Graham Cool, and I have not been able to sleep well at night ever since Bill tweeted that suggestion. Besides, Dingle's owners don't have nearly enough money for the lawyers they'd need to take on Disney in court. Andre Girard sent this question in from Quebec. Hi, Mark. Hope you're well despite the situation. Quick question I am looking for an answer on. As some Scottish distillers reuse Jack Daniel's casks, and as Jack Daniel's is a Tennessee whiskey, not a bourbon, by regulation I mean, I understand the term ex-bourbon barrel is legal. How can this be? Thanks for sharing your thoughts on this. Take care, Andre. Well, thank you, Andre. And yeah, I can see where this might be confusing to a lot of people. First of all, Tennessee whiskey has to meet the same legal standards for bourbon, so there is literally no difference in the barrels when they're used for Scotch or other whiskeys. And since distilleries are likely to source their barrels from brokers, it's likely that they're going to wind up with a mix of barrels from distilleries in Kentucky, Tennessee, and other states, so it's really just a lot easier to use the generic term ex-bourbon barrels instead. Hope that helps, Andre, and thank you for the question. Now, if you have a question, suggestion, or anything else you'd like to share with whiskey lovers from around the world, you can always find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at WhiskyCast. The email address is comments@whiskycast.com. Your voice is presented by Scarabus, Islay Single Malt Scotch Whisky.
I'm Scott Lane from Hunter Lane & Company. We want to wish you a happy festive season from all of our team in Scotland. And if you're travelling this holiday season, seek out a Total Wine & More store. We'd love to join you in toasting 2022 with a dram of our Scarabus Islay Single Malt Scotch Whisky. And Total Wine is the US home for Scarabus. Only those who seek shall find.
Let's wrap things up now with Behind the Label, our look at the history, science, and people that make whiskey unique. It's brought to you by Writer's Tears. Last time around, we had a two-part question from Kevin DeVries and answered the first part about how mash bills can affect the flavor of a whiskey. Now for the second part of his question, how to start on properly tasting them to pick up on the flavors you mention in your tasting notes. Well, first of all, if I can learn how to taste whiskeys, you can. It is not that hard to do at all. The key is to use a glass like a Glencairn that is narrower at the rim than in the middle. That way the aromas are focused more tightly as you're nosing a whiskey. When you use a rocks-style glass, there is far too much space for aromas to escape around your nose. That narrow glass also allows you to move it from side to side between your left and right nostrils. Now, this is not the most scientifically accurate way to explain it, but we smell in stereo, sort of. The scent receptors in each nostril pick up aromas slightly differently, and moving the glass back and forth gives you a much rounder perspective. Keep your mouth slightly open as you're inhaling through your nose. That allows the alcohol to escape your nostrils quickly and not numb the scent receptors. After that, it's actually easy. Just pay attention to the aromas that you're smelling and the flavors you're tasting, and come up with your own vocabulary to describe them. You can find nosing kits for sale online that package various spices, fruits, and other aromas that you're likely to find in most whiskeys. But it is very easy to make your own nosing kit, too. Empty baby food jars are perfect for creating your own samples of things like orange peel, black pepper, coconut, ground vanilla, and other things. Kevin, I hope this answers your question. If there is something you'd like to see us look at on an upcoming episode, just use the contact form at whiskycast.com, or do like Kevin did and track me down on social media. Behind the Label is brought to you by Writer's Tears.
Writer's Tears Copperpot, a rare style of Irish whiskey with a creative twist. a unique triple distilled blend of single pot still and single malt premium Irish whiskies. Writer's Tears Copperpot. Do you dare to be creative?
That's all for this edition of WhiskyCast. You'll find links for the stories in this episode in our show notes at whiskycast.com. That's also where you'll find the latest whiskey news, my tasting notes, the calendar of events, the whiskey photo of the week, and of course a complete archive of all of our past episodes going all the way back to 2005. You can always get in touch with us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at WhiskyCast. The email address is comments@whiskycast.com.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
Ever wondered where Redbreast got its name? Well, let's go back to 1912 and be glad our bird-watching founder didn't spot the bar-tailed godwit that day.
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast. Redbreast. Pass it on.
Just like the end of this WhiskyCast episode, Dewar's Scotch Whisky always makes for a smooth finish. Like our newly released Dewar's Japanese Smooth, aged for 8 years in Scotland, blended then aged again before being finished for up to 6 months in Mizunara oak casks made from 200-year-old Japanese water oak trees. These unique casks layer distinct dry and spicy flavors to the whiskey, with aromas reminiscent of sandalwood and incense. Keep an eye out for a bottle of Dewar's Japanese Smooth at a store near you.
WhiskyCast is a production of Cask Strength Media, copyright 2021, and comes to you from the charming, yet regrettably dry town of Haddonfield, New Jersey. I'm Mark Gillespie, reminding you that when you drink, please drink responsibly. Thanks for listening, and please stay safe.